ever think about, like, what happens after someone's freed from prison?
Yeah.
Like, after a wrongful conviction,
Yeah.
You see it in the movies, right?
Yeah.
Like the big courtroom scene, not guilty. Everyone's cheering, hugging. But then the credits roll.
Right.
It's over. But in real life, what about the years that person lost?
Yeah.
The trauma. Like, how do you even come back from that?
It's a question a lot of people don't think about.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at Anthony Ray Hinton's case.
And it really makes you think about, like, what we as a society, what we owe to those who were, wronged by the very system that's supposed to protect them.
Exactly. And we've got a ton to unpack today. Court records, legal analyses. We've even got Hinton's own book, The Sun Does Shine. And trust me, you'll want to hear his words.
Powerful stuff.
But, okay, before we get into all that, let's set the scene a little bit, all right? So picture this. 1985, Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
A string of robberies and murders has the city on edge.
Yeah.
And then, enter Anthony Ray Hinton.
Arrested based on, well, we've seen it before, shaky eyewitness testimony.
Oh, yeah.
And then ballistics, supposedly linking a gun to the crime scenes.
His mother's gun. Wow.
Yeah, his mother's gun. Which, and keep in mind, forensic science back then, it wasn't what it is today.
Not even close. Okay, so put yourself in Hinton's shoes for a minute. You're arrested for something you didn't do. You know you're innocent, but nobody believes you. You're convicted.
Wow.
Sentenced to death. And you spend the next 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
On death row. 30 years. Let that sink in for a second.
Almost impossible to fathom.
It really is. And this is where Hinton's story, it becomes more than just this awful tragedy, It becomes this magnifying glass on the system itself. Because thankfully, Hinton and the Equal Justice Initiative, these guys, they wouldn't give up.
Amazing people.
They fought so hard, they uncovered new evidence, exposed all these flaws in the original forensics.
Which is what we were just talking about, how different it was back then.
Right. Exactly. And thank goodness they did, because finally, in 2015, the state of Alabama, they admitted it.
Yeah.
They didn't have enough to convict Hinton in the first place.
Wow.
He was exonerated, finally free. But here's the thing, the question we're really wrestling with today. Can you ever truly compensate for that?
Right. How do you even begin to?
I mean, how do you even begin to make that right?
It's a question that Alabama and, frankly, a lot of states have tried to address with these compensation laws.
All right.
Alabama, they've got this thing called the Wrongful Incarceration Compensation Act.
Okay, so on the surface, that sounds...
It sounds promising.
Right. Like, okay, finally some justice. But you dig a little deeper, and it gets complicated.
It does. Well, it's meant to, get this, compensate certain innocent persons.
Hold on, certain?
Yeah.
Not just anyone who was, wrongly locked up.
Right.
What does that even mean?
That's the thing. That little phrase, certain innocent persons, it creates this whole other battle for people like Anthony Ray Hinton. Yeah.
They escaped one nightmare only to end up in, another one. So after 30 years, after proving they were wrong, after all that, he still has to prove he's innocent.
Yeah.
Again.
It's like they're saying, yeah, okay, we messed up, but was it really our bad?
Yeah.
And this need to prove you're innocent even after exoneration. This isn't just some bureaucratic technicality. This isn't just paperwork.
Right.
This goes way deeper. It really strikes at the heart of something, a legal principle, centuries old, the presumption of innocence.
Okay, wait, so we're not just talking about, modern day Alabama. We're talking about the foundation of how we view justice, going way, way back.
Precisely.
Okay, so break this down for me. How does some legal principle from, centuries ago, how does that connect to what's happening with Hinton right now?
So think about those old movies, right?
Yeah.
Someone accused of witchcraft or something, just because they were different, didn't fit in. Back then, your reputation, what people thought of you, that mattered more than actual evidence. Oh, yeah. If you were a so-called bad person, if the community decided that's who you were pretty much doomed.
So the presumption of innocence, that idea, it was meant to be oh, whoa, hold on. Let's look at the facts here, not just rumors and what your neighbor said.
Exactly. It levels the playing field.
Makes sense.
Everyone, no matter who they are, what people say about them, they deserve to be treated fairly under the law.
Which makes what's happening in Hinton even crazier. It's like Alabama's saying, yeah, we freed you, but we still don't fully trust you.
It's almost like they're holding on to this image of him, right?
Yes.
From decades ago.
It's like they're still trying to punish him for who they think he is.
And And it's not just the way the law is written, right? It's the tactics that the Attorney General's office, they used these tactics when they were fighting against Hinton's claim.
What do you mean?
Remember how they were saying that the only evidence against Hinton was that faulty ballistics analysis, the gun?
Right, the analysis that was proven wrong.
Exactly. But then, get this, then they started bringing up other accusations against Hinton. Stuff that had nothing to do with the crimes he was convicted of, you know.
Wait, really?
Trying to make him look bad.
So even though those accusations were irrelevant, they're trying to use them to deny him compensation.
Exactly. They're trying to work around the presumption of innocence by saying, oh, well, yeah, he might not have committed those specific robberies, but look at all this other stuff.
It's like they're trying to say he's not a saint, so he doesn't deserve anything.
And that sets a dangerous precedent. If the state can just throw out random accusations to avoid paying someone, who's to stop them from doing that to anyone, right?
To anyone who's been exonerated,
yeah,
it throws the whole idea of justice out the window, right?
Completely.
What's the point of saying someone's innocent if you can just keep using these other things against them?
Exactly. It undermines the whole system. It's a crucial question, and it goes way beyond just, state law. We're talking about the U.S. Constitution now.
Okay, now we're getting to the big leagues. So we're talking about the Constitution. How does that play into all of this?
So let's start with the 13th Amendment. The one that abolished slavery.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States.
You got it.
I remember that from school.
Right. But there's a really important exception in that amendment, okay? Involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime, that's allowed, but only if someone is actually convicted.
Right.
But Hinton wasn't. He was exonerated. They said he was innocent. So, could denying him compensation for those decades he was locked up, could that be seen as a form of involuntary servitude? Think about it.
It's like they're saying, yeah, you were wrongfully imprisoned, but you still owe us for that time.
It's like you owe us for your freedom.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. And it's not just the 13th Amendment. What about the 5th Amendment?
The Fifth Amendment, that's...
due process.
Oh, right. Right, due process. That's the right to a fair trial, yeah.
It's more than that. It's the principle that the government can't just take away your life, liberty, or property without a good reason and a fair, just process.
Right.
So is it really due process to deny someone their liberty for decades and then deny them compensation without a real chance to prove their case?
It's like they're victimized by the system twice. Like, first with the wrongful conviction, and then, when they're finally free, this fight for recognition.
And that's really the heart of the issue here. We're talking about human beings,
So we've talked about, like, the laws, the constitutional stuff, but it's easy to get lost in all that. At the end of the day, this isn't just about legal arguments, is it? It's about a real person.
Exactly. We can't forget that for Anthony Ray Hinton, this wasn't just a case, Those 30 years, that was his life. Think about it. Decades. Gone. Stuck in a tiny cell, the fear, knowing they might execute you any day.
You didn't even do anything.
Right. The psychological toll, like how do you even wrap your head around that?
It's almost impossible. And then on top of all that, you get out and the world's different. Everyone's moved on. You have to rebuild your life from scratch.
It's a whole other level of loss. People talk about like, oh, he's free. He should just be grateful. But it's not that simple.
Not even close. And that's where, I don't know, the moral argument for compensation, it feels so much stronger than just the legal stuff.
Absolutely. This isn't about a handout. It's about righting a wrong. Acknowledging that something was taken that can never be given back.
Exactly. How do you even put a price tag on 30 years of someone's life?
You can't. But then you have people saying, well, these payouts, they're too expensive. States can't afford to compensate everyone.
Right. I've heard that argument. So what do you say to that?
I always ask, what's the cost of not compensating them? What message does that send? To me, it's like saying, well, we're okay with sacrificing innocent lives if it means saving some money. Like, justice has a price tag, and for some people, it's just too high.
It's also, like, ignoring the bigger picture, right? I mean, if states knew they'd have to pay up when they get it wrong, wouldn't they be more careful to get it right in the first place?
Exactly. It incentivizes them to prevent these wrongful convictions from happening. Imagine if they knew, okay, if we mess this up, it's going to cost us millions. They'd be a lot more likely to invest in, like, better training for police, for lawyers.
Make sure the forensics labs are top-notch.
Exactly. Strengthen legal aid services, Really take a hard look at the system and how to fix it.
So it's not just about making things right for the people who've been hurt. It's about stopping it from happening to anyone else.
Exactly. It's about creating a justice system that actually lives up to its name. One that values fairness and accuracy, not just speed and saving a buck.
Which brings us back to Anthony Ray Hinton. So, even after everything, even after a committee finally said, okay, yeah, this guy deserves compensation, he still had to wait.
I know.
The Alabama legislature had to actually approve the payment.
It's unbelievable, right?
It never ends. It just goes to show the fight for justice, it doesn't end with a judge's gavel or a signature on a piece of paper.
Nope. For a lot of these folks, it's a lifelong battle against bureaucracy, against people just not caring.
Yeah.
And that lingering suspicion, like they still haven't really cleared their name.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts for our listeners today?
I think the biggest thing to remember is this. As awful as Hinton's story is, it's not unique. There are others out there, right now, going through the exact same thing. Locked up for something they didn't do. Forgotten. We can't let ourselves get numb to it, you know?
Because if it can happen to one person, it can happen to anyone.
Exactly.
And that's a scary thought.
It is, and that's why we have to do better. We have to demand better from our justice system. It's on all of us to stay informed, to hold our leaders accountable.
To fight for a future where justice is real for everyone.
Yes. Not just a word, but a reality.
A future where 30 years of someone's life, it's not just some political bargaining chip.
Right.
But a stark reminder of what happens when we get it wrong. And I love this quote from one of the articles we read. A civilized society demands no more from its government than justice, and the people of that society ought to accept no less.
Powerful stuff. Couldn't agree more.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But this conversation doesn't end here. We hope you'll keep thinking about Anthony Ray Hinton's story, about everyone who's been affected by wrongful conviction. Keep asking questions. Keep digging for the truth. Until next time.